Hicks is second. Yep.
Right, I'd like to welcome everyone to the San Mateo County Harbor District Board of Harbor Commissioners special meeting for June 13th. May we have a roll call?
President Mateusz,
Aye. Here.
Commissioner Zemke,
Here.
Commissioner Domerat,
Here.
Commissioner Chang Crowley,
Here,
Commissioner
present.
Slater Carter.
Present.
All right, so this time of the evening or the meeting when we take public comments for items not on the agenda. You have up to 2 minutes, I believe. Am I understanding that we have something not on the agenda?
Yes.
Okay. Edmundo Lorenas.
Hello, everyone. Good to see you all. I don't have a prepared statement, but I would like to repeat what I've said many times to you all. Do something for the public to be able to talk to you. So I don't have a job. I'm retired. I have some time on my hands, but I'm still pretty busy. And I know a lot of folks on the coast. I know a lot of electeds, and the RV lot agenda item from yesterday came to my attention only a few days before. I don't always look at your agenda items when I'm traveling or doing something else, so that's on me.
Percent.
Yeah. But also it's very difficult to get here at 10 o'clock in the morning. And I, like I said, I'm retired, but I have, 10 o'clock in the morning is a minute a day for me, 10 to whatever. If you could hold your meetings at a time when the rest of the public could listen to you, it would go a long way to making people happy with your decisions, give them a voice. Right now, they don't have a voice. I know that we can write something in, and you all were very kind to take my statement, but I had barely enough time to look at the agenda. And in this case, for whatever reason, it wasn't complete. So what I wrote to you all was really written only because I had the experience and I know people in both sides that have opinions about this. Once again, change your meeting times to the time when the public can be here in the evenings like we used to do. I know I've said this before and I'm urging you to do it again. And then for this meeting, I know that you're on the letter of the law, but you got it to me with 5 minutes to spare. You know, that's not telling the public, gee whiz, we really want you down here. You didn't have to, at least as far as I know, I don't see the urgency to have this meeting right now, 24 hours from the other meeting. I mean, look, you got 2 people here. I don't know. No one can comment on Zoom now. You've made it really difficult. So do something about that, please. Thanks.
That concludes our public comments, and now on to the item on the agenda. That's real property lease, Surfers Beach RV Park. General Manager Pruitt, this is your item.
This item was presented to the board at its regular meetings yesterday, and the board elected or decided to push it to today to a special meeting because I wasn't able to post the draft lease online in time for the public to review it. Yesterday, the board directed that the personal guarantee be added back to the lease as part of it. So I worked with Pillar Point Harbor LLC yesterday. We tentatively agreed with a new personal guarantee, which is attached, and it's also in your board packages. Everything else in the lease remains the same. The lease price is 26 cents a square foot, and the first term is 2 years, followed by a 3-year term, provided that the tenant complies with all requirements of the lease, which includes full compliance and continuing compliance with the CDP. Then after 5 years, right now it's drafted as 3 renewals for up to 10 years each. And 5 years, 5 years each.
Yeah.
And You're right, 5.
Up to, actually, up to
Up to
5.
5 years each, and the tenant must be in compliance with his lease before it can be renewed at any point. All the other information that was passed, but I wanted to make sure we were clear on those points.
Right. Before we open up to commissioner discussion, we have a couple of public comments on this issue. So I'd like to call Lisa Ketchum.
Hello, everyone. Thanks. I presume you have the complete conditions of approval, not just what I sent in my letter.
Yep.
Because I focused on landscaping, that's my thing. But lighting is also very important. There was a letter from 2015 when I was on the Midcoast Community Council, and we were trying to get various issues addressed at the RV park. And so lighting and also the landscaping down below the RVs, basically the views from the Golden Trail. So let me see, I'm getting scattered here. Timing of this. So I attended and commented at the Half Moon Bay Planning Commission in 2019 and they were very meticulous with this and the conditions of approval and listened to people and put it all together. And I thought, finally, we're going to get something done here. This is in 2019. So now, 5 years later, I'm very happy to see that you have this as a condition, complying with these conditions of approval, that you have your lease renewal tied to that. However, in 2019, the time period to address the lighting and the landscaping was under 1 year. And now 5 years have gone by, and now we're going to give them 2 more years. I don't understand this. And I'm also familiar on the San Mateo County Planning Commission, having been there on the commission when the Harbor Village RV Park was approved, and also the Moss Beach Chevron Station landscape buffer that's to address a violation. When those were approved, and then having to speak up later on because those 2 projects, these are under the same ownership. Did I neglect to say that? Building permit for the RV park came right away, but the building permit for to fix the violation at the Chevron, nothing, and so I had to speak up and to say, how can we approve this building permit if you're letting this other one just sit there? And so
A 2-minute limit on this, so if you could wind it up, we'd appreciate it.
basically, the planning director had to call the owner of the property and say, Lena, look, you need to get this building permit. And now we're at the stage where the building permit has expired, and the planning director has had to call and say, now look, so it's something else needs to motivate it. This is my concern. I hope we don't have to wait another 2 years.
All right, we have a speaker's comment card from Edmundo Lorenas.
To start on this. I haven't had a chance to completely review this, but I'm very happy, even excited, you might say, that this is before you all. I go back to 19, say 20 years on this particular. I was trying to just get this organization, not the Harbor District, well, both actually. First, the leasee and then the leaseor, to just comply with a simple request to add some bathrooms for the public. 0. In fact, they threatened you all with legal action back then. Now we have simple request, the view corridor, the landscaping that Lisa was talking about, keeping the place clean. This organization has never been genuine about the work that they're doing for us. And now's a great time to make them do the right thing. And also, I suggest to you that there are other options. You don't have to lease it to this person necessarily. You can run it yourself. I know that you're the San Mateo County Harbor District. You're not the San Mateo County Harbor and RV District. But nevertheless, that is an option. The public should be allowed to weigh in on this. Another option is take a little bit more space from the RV lot to add some public parking, because day use parking is, as you all know, anyone that drives down Highway 1 on a Saturday or on a holiday, how packed it is here. Be quick. So let the public weigh in on this. I don't see the urgency to get this done right now. If my understanding is that it's on a 2 months lease or rental agreement, take the time to really think this through. That area there is really precious to the public.
Just has to fill out a speaker card, that's all.
Hold on.
Yes, he's on. Yeah, no, Will just texted me and said, I could say that he agrees with me. I said, yeah. I don't know.
We
That's
can
good.
open it up to public comment again.
Yeah.
So in the day use parking, I don't know if you looked at your one page, it shows 10 or 12 day spots. And then Lisa, with regard to your request the other day about a detailed space, there's our drawing shows 3 EV spaces. There's 4 EV spaces.
I didn't say anything about the park.
You asked for a detailed drawing, a little bit more detail. I was just trying to help.
Larger
It
scale
was
than.
a clearer drawing, but I don't think it was parking.
That's all, yeah.
Yeah.
I was hoping.
All right, commissioner comments.
Well, are we gonna have Jim, I guess you're done with your staff.
The parking that's there right now, it's both the public parking that is able-bodied parking, and then there's handicap parking. The the parking spot that's for loading zone, the 2 spots that are for the surf school, all those parking spots have been required by the district from the CDP. So we're following the CDP on how many parking spots we have and what they consist of. We've actually gone beyond what was required with EVs, because we were supposed to have 1 EV station that services 2 parking spots, but we actually have 2 EV stations that service 3 parking spots. So it's an addition, or four, so additional parking spots for EVs. It does take away 1 from the day lot, but you can use it for day parking or EV charging, such your choice. But we didn't have any choice on where to place the handicapped parking or the other van parking, or the parking plan for that was directed to us.
Catherine.
Okay, I'm going to do my comments by the topics on the lease. So this one is about parking. It's on page 3, item 5
Of the updated.
of the
lease.
updated lease. And I think it is a by the way, I have found so many holes and liabilities in this lease. I believe you need another attorney, a real estate specialist, to look at it. And I'm willing to go and find one, because this leaves this, and I'm happy to go item by item. It may take a while, or you can just tell me to find an
No,
attorney.
just go.
So on parking, it
What page is
reads
that again?
on page 3, item
There it
I,
is.
parking. I'll read as it's written. Tenant and tenants invitees are invited to park in unreserved, unassigned parking spaces adjacent to the premises in compliance with San Mateo County Harbor District Ordinance Code. The landlord shall not be obligated but may monitor the use of such spaces, tow vehicles at the owner's expense, install any signs, or mark the spaces. All that's well and good. There is nothing in here that says this parking is open to the public. And the tenant, and it needs to be open to the public, not just the tenants' invitees or the tenants. I happened to stop in at what looked like a public parking space one day earlier in the year, and I had this woman come out and tell me it was not public parking and I was not allowed to be there in an ever so pleasant voice. And I want it to be specifically allowed for public parking. Right now, we are losing 100% of the public parking on Highway 1. Because the county and it's my appeal, the county wants to put in bike lanes. That will create even more demand and just a horrendous situation there. I have argued in favor of the Harbor District not having to add parking, but the way I read this, it can be taken away by our tenants, guests, or invitees. And I think we have to make sure that it is at least signed and up, and the tenant knows that this is for public parking and they can't chase people out. That's just one. I'll wait for the next one. Coastal Commission is hearing my appeal. It's a de novo appeal, Half Moon Bay Planning. Very generously, and Half Moon Bay City Council support my appeal. So we're looking at all the parking at the Coastal Commission level for along there. But we've already got our CDPs for the RV park. I am just trying to protect what public parking we have and maintain it.
Other commissioner comments, or would somebody like to make a motion to approve this lease?
I have many more things to discuss.
All right,
So are you recommending signage that would also say no overnight parking at the public spots? That would keep the tenants, people out of it because they're typically parking overnight. I mean, if they're part of the public, it'd be interesting to see how you'd be able to keep them out of the spots, but
It's a
Yeah.
public parking lot and it's required by our plans and specifications that the spots are labeled, just like the
Labeled, okay.
handicaps. So you'll have the spots that are EV are labeled as EV, the open public parking spots, and then the surf school spot parking lots. Because it'll be signage will be provided in accordance with the Harbor District Ordinance Code. And these spaces are off of the premises. They're not within the premises being leased. They're in the public part of the
okay.
RV park and bathroom and green space areas. So it's all public parking.
I guess
And
that's
it's public parking, anybody can park there. So as long as they qualify for that spot. If you have disability plates or placards, you can park in the disability placards. Other than that, they're open spots. We don't have a limit on the time for the spots. And we're not closing the parking lot at night.
You have no overnight parking.
there should be overnight parking at those public spots though, I would think, right? You don't want people sleeping in their
No,
car.
they can't, there is no overnight camping in those spots, no.
Right.
But you can park your car.
Yeah, you got
There's a
72
difference
hours.
between camping and
Yeah.
parking, and George and I are both asking about parking.
Is that,
I said, George and I are being more inclusive of the extended no parking to include, no time limits to say no parking overnight.
that would be different than every other spot we have in the district.
Well,
I'm
you can
not
change-
arguing either way. I'm just,
Right,
that's what it is.
you can change things.
The challenge is that right next to it, you have an RV lot that they park for a week at a time. If they have a second car and there's no place to park there, they'll park in the public lot unless you then tell them, they'd have to move that car. I mean, the California law, I guess, and county laws that you could park on public
That's how it is
spots
now.
for 72 hours. So, but I don't know, is that considered, I guess that's considered
Public parking.
public parking.
Well, the state,
But I don't know.
state parks with public park are sunrise to sunset.
When they close the park.
Right.
I just want to make sure it's available to the non-RV public, you know. And that's the only thing.
It's,
I don't know how
I
to
mean,
do
we are
that,
a
but-
public agency and we should
Right, I mean.
remember that.
President Mateusz, I just offer that that section makes clear that to the tenant, that the district has the ability to
No letter there to do.
to enforce its own parking laws, to make its parking laws, to enforce its own parking
Okay.
laws and all
It's
of
my
that.
opinion, unless we make things very specifically clear in this contract, it leaves room for abuse and lawsuits. My primary goal as a board member here is to protect the district financially so that we can continue to operate. I don't want us to be defeated by stupid lawsuits that, and a bad contract that left holes in.
Is there any legal challenge to put something on that spot that would say no overnight parking?
But this is not, this is a contract with the landlord, I mean, with the
Yeah.
tenant. And I think
Sure.
what this is saying is, tenant be advised, district has its own rules and regulations about public parking. You're gonna have to abide by those. So I think if you wanted to have a 24-hour parking limit, that would be something you do as the district, exercising your own powers. And this provision just tells the tenant, be aware.
I want, I've been a landlord for a long time. I was a tenant for even more years. I understand. I've paid a lot of tuition in life experience to understand one must be very, very, very specific in contracts. If you are not, it's a vulnerability. I want, when the tenant signs this, I don't want him to say, oh, that wasn't very clear. I want things to be very, very clear. Very important to me to protect this district. We've lost lawsuits. We've spent millions of dollars that if we'd had a good contract, we wouldn't have had to pay. So this is what I'm coming from.
I think it's also important to remember that there's an entire set of harbor ordinances that coexist with the tenants and with the public.
That's well. Does the public know it? Are they there posted? I think it's important to post signs so that people know, no overnight parking. Because certainly towing somebody who's been there overnight is going to be less of a public, more of a public nuisance than having a sign that says no overnight.
Going back to legal counsel, that would be something we would do. We're not requiring the tenant to put up a sign that says that.
We're just wanting the tenant to be aware.
It's easy enough to do, I think.
It's just a
You're
little
not,
bit of
didn't answer
language.
George's question. Do you want a sign there from the Harbor District to say no overnight parking?
Yes,
We take that up some other time with our policies and review.
but I
that.
want it to
Okay.
be in here so the tenant is not surprised.
Yeah, but we haven't taken it up yet. I mean, I guess what you're suggesting is we delay the lease until we come up with revisions to our code.
Well, I wouldn't mind that, but that said, putting it in here is public information. We may decide not to put the signs up, but if we put the signs up and he complains and it's not in this lease, then where are we?
That's like, that's similar to the lease that we had with the Catch that, you know, we allow food trucks if necessary. Because we had that situation come up, right, with the car show that's coming up in July that says that asked for a permit for one permit for a food truck. And, you know, it's very clear in the lease with the tenants that, you know, food trucks will be allowed. And so I think if you want that clarity, I think it's important. I mean, and I'm not going to interrupt, but I mean, little things, like there's a little typo in number 7 under utilities, you know, where it says, and I'm not trying to change the subject, I'm
No.
just trying to make things clear that, about 7A, tenant shall be responsible for the payment of all utilities and services in connection with the premises, including but limited to, and I think you probably meant but not limited to, right? But these are the things that are actually written in the contract. And so whatever is written, I think should be as clear as possible. So that little mistake cost the district. So it's little things like that. And so I'm just, thanks, Catherine, for catching some of these things. And I just think clarity in a contract, and this is a contract, I mean, it's what a lease is very important.
You have recommended language for,
Maybe could I
Parking?
offer something? And see if this
Issue?
was, yeah, to see if this would get at the issue? Something along the lines of tenant acknowledges that the district may impose and enforce 24-hour parking limits?
I mean, it's not, it's not just the 24-hour or overnight
And
parking, it's
it's not
anything, right?
tenant.
Well, it is tenant.
No, we're the landlord.
No, but she's saying tenant acknowledges it that we
Oh,
can
can,
enforce
yes,
that.
yes. And it acknowledges, because I am, and I just, I'm not an attorney, I don't write legalese, I only find holes in it. These spaces shall be open for public, no overnight parking. I'm sure there's a more elegant way to write it.
Just to be clear, as we're drafting this, I think Jim said that right now, the harbor, that the district code allows overnight parking.
I realize that, and it's appropriate in some parking lots, but maybe not all of them.
Can we just say that the Harbor District reserves the right to review and update its parking policies from time to time? Or something of that at least puts them on notice that we may change our parking policy.
it says that in there.
And it kind of says that.
San Mateo County Harbor
It
District
kind of says that, but
ordinance code.
sometimes we create a problem before we realize a problem may happen. It could happen, it may not happen, but there is that statement that if we see that happening, we can also make those changes, we can add signs. So,
Well, my experience with contracts, and trust me, I've been in a 7-year lawsuit over language in contracts. I'm hypersensitive to it, and this implies to some attorneys' ways of thinking. And Trish, I'm sure you haven't worked with these attorneys, but I'm trying to defend against them. And they go, oh, well, this contract was signed in 2024, and you've changed the ordinance since then. We never agreed to that change. Things that I'm fighting a multi-million-dollar lawsuits on right now. I understand how some of these things think. One small addition is item G under hazardous materials up on, above page 3.
Which page?
It's
Page
page
three.
Page 3, it's right, it's two sections above.
And I don't mind repeating things in leases. I think it only puts the importance
Clarity.
on them. I believe lithium-ion batteries should be something that is listed under hazardous materials, and that the tenant should be responsible for them. They're gonna have contracts. My house burned down because of a lithium-ion battery explosion. I know how it works. Poof, my house was gone. If he has somebody charging equipment somewhere, or one of the RVs explodes, we don't want to be responsible. So I want somewhere under hazardous materials that the tenant assumes full and all liability on this stuff. That's a little easy one to add. But I'm gonna go back to page 1 unless people object.
No, go ahead, because I agree that it has to be, this lease or contract has to be clear. I just have a more general question about the personal guarantee, but so just.
yeah, I have a general question also that maybe applies to the whole thing too.
Sure, go.
It is my understanding that the coastal development permit that they complied with all of the landscaping plans and everything else? Those have all been submitted already, or are they still?
Correct me if I'm wrong, John, but all the plans have been completed and provided to Moon Bay. I don't know if they've ever been approved yet, but they do exist.
So in theory, if all of that is done and it would look good, there would be no reason why, we can encourage for the sake of the public to have them start implementing that landscaping plan by doing something quicker than they
Yes.
may, so that they don't have to wait 2 years to maybe cut down the trees and
No,
start
I-
doing that part or whatever, so.
I fully expect that the landscaping will be immediate
In mind.
within, you're talking few months, not a few years.
If those plans were not approved, then that's another issue then.
I believe they've been, I can't guarantee you.
Okay.
If I remember right, they've been working on them and
I
changing
don't think
plans.
it's our responsibility to deal with those plans.
That's true. But I'm just looking at timeline and where in our minds we can accelerate them and kind of request them to do certain
My
things
exact
early
point.
than other things.
Page 1, item 2, coastal development permits. It is that you're only talking about one coastal development permit that's 5 years old in this paragraph. What about future coastal development permits, and why did it take 5 years? When I've gone to get coastal development permits and things through, when my other districts have done that, we get them, we pursue them. This tenant should be pursuing getting those done. It's their responsibility, not ours. Shouldn't have to pay staff time. I'd like to see something like coastal development permit, and somewhere in here, it says shall at tenant's sole costs and expense perform all the work required pursuant to the CDP from July 9, 2019. And it defines it, but it doesn't say he has an obligation to get those in and get it installed in a certain amount of time. And so what we have seen in this one example is somebody slow walking their own responsibilities. And that's why I'm being so nitpicky about this lease.
Does the CDP give a timetable in it
They
that requires within X amount of time you have to comply with the CDP?
just say you have to do it.
Do it.
I guess I could just disagree a little bit on there because they have to update us on the 4 dates listed on here. And at the end of 2 years, if they haven't complied with it, we don't have to give them a contract.
That's all well and good, but it's 5 years we've been waiting.
It's,
Past
Different.
behavior tells me what.
This is a
you-
brand new lease. We know what he did in the past. Everyone on the coast knows that nothing was complied with. All we can do is go from today and move forward.
I accept that, and I'm willing to say that I'd like to see subsequent CDPs listed in here and all due haste and timeliness on doing CDPs. If this board approves the lease the way it's written with all the extensions, we've given a green light to him for 20 years. And we're going to have to argue over everything. We can see it. You got to learn from your history. So keep going.
Can I interject something?
Please.
So I think the point is right now, that, we've had to suffer through the Harbor District, and this predates all of us, including Ed when he was on the board, right? That there hasn't been good leases that actually, and those leases that were not good have actually harmed the Harbor District. And we've seen that this is the third lease that we've negotiated kind of like in the last year, right? This is the third one. And I think that we're trying to get consistency, clarity, and in some continuity, like with the tenants, right? But I think the important thing is I don't think being nitpicky is a bad thing because we want to change the leases. That's one of the things that has been kind of a priority, is to get out of these leases so that the Harbor District can actually benefit from the enterprise side of the budget, if you think about it, right? I mean, that's really why we're doing this. And I get that it's important to make the money, but it's equally important to make sure that we have these leases so that the Harbor District is protected and our financial position is enhanced as much as possible. Because we have that 35% of the budget that we have to take care of. So I think if we go through this lease, and I think, thanks for being nitpicky about it. And I think, and I urge anyone on this board to be nitpicky about it. I think there shouldn't be any room for criticism for being nitpicky. How these leases are structured, it's gonna govern how that side of the budget gonna be for the next, well, according to this lease and the Catches lease and other leases for multiple years beyond the 1 year, what would be beyond like long-term, the 1 year general time frame. So I don't know. I don't know if we want to sit here and do that. I mean, we've had the lease.
For 24
But we haven't
hours.
had the updated lease. I mean, because so my thing, Jim, is that the personal guarantee, actually, why was that taken out? Because we've had discussions about that, and that was something that I think that the board wanted to have. So I'm just curious, what happened to make that provision of the lease be taken out? Because that was a pretty big thing.
They had some concerns over the personal guarantee. The main paragraph they had a concern with is the personal guarantee required them to, upon 10 days' notice, provide all their financials to the district.
Right. Okay,
And they did not want to do that.
they are a private company, so I can understand it. And the
Right.
personal guarantee says that if you are a public company, you have to deal with you have to, send in per request from the Harbor District, the K filing, the Ks and the whatever SEC filings. But they know that as a private company, they don't have to comply with SEC rules and laws. So, but the thing is, we need to understand if something happens that, that we need to have access to that. So I get that. I think that was in, is that provision number 9 in the
It was
personal
somewhere in there.
guarantee? Yeah, I think it was number 9. So I'm sorry, Jim, I couldn't make out what the markups was. So they still want to keep that out, right? So
Yeah, they had several different comments, or not several, but they had half a dozen different comments, and I tentatively agreed to some of them, but most of them we did not agree with.
you threw out the entire personal guarantee based on that one provision?
That was, they had a couple problems with the personal guarantee. We didn't discuss it in detail. So I balanced the personal guarantee against their deposit because it's either
$30,000 is
And
not that much.
made a recommendation to the board. The board disagreed with my recommendation. So we put the personal guarantee, I worked with them and put the personal guarantee back in.
The personal guarantee, you were directed to keep it in. I have the notes.
Okay, but didn't you just hear that he put it back in?
I understand, but I understand that, Tom, but the rationale for taking it out is actually for the benefit of the tenant and not the Harbor District. And that's what I'm having a heartache over.
I viewed it as of getting a lease signed so that we can start
I know.
making an income. So it wasn't necessarily benefiting the tenant, or my goal
Benefits
was
the tenant.
to get more income for the district. That was it. I'm not trying to hide anything
I
from
know
the
you're not, I
board.
know.
That's why I sent it out saying, this is what I do. This is what I did and what I recommend.
That was what you would ask. us.
And the board came back and said, no, we don't agree with you. Get it back in there. So yesterday I went back in, worked with them on specifically what they had problems with, tentatively agreed with them on stuff that I would recommend to the board. And that's where it is right now is what the personal guarantee in front of you is what I'm recommending to the board.
Right,
And
without,
what I either added or deleted. And they wanted that paragraph deleted.
without item 9, but what, let's see, let me ask you this. If the board wants item 9, is that a deal breaker?
We didn't get that far.
Thanks.
Can I ask another question? Going back a little bit. On page 2 at the top, as part of the coastal development permit.
The lease, are you looking at the lease or the personal?
lease.
guarantee?
George,
Okay.
do you read that the same way I read it?
Well, we're gonna find out in a second. I see that their failure to do what they're supposed to do in the 2019, they have a 1 year to comply.
Correct.
From 2019. That's the way it's written.
Well, no, I don't read it that way then.
Okay.
It's the 2019 was when the coastal commission and the coastal development permit was originally written. Those don't have a timetable on them, so we can't hold a timetable to that. But that's the document we're referring to as 2019.
They have a year.
We talked about this a while ago where we only wanted to give them 1 year to comply with all this.
Says that.
And then it went to 2 years, I thought.
Well, and here's what I
don't think so. I
read.
think it was more.
And
It was always one- Now, the 2 year, the contract, the first component is 2 years. But in that first year, we have to they have to do this, otherwise
And if they don't comply within 365 days, then
we can do whatever we
Follow
want to
the
do.
termination
Okay,
pursuant to-
okay.
Right,
Grammar.
yeah.
I particularly like commas because they group things together. The way I read this is tenant's failure to fulfill its obligations under the 2019 coastal development permit within 365 days of the effective date shall be the event of default. The effective date of the 2019 coastal commission was 2019.
I think effective date is the effective date of the signing of this
The
lease.
lease. It's
Right.
effective.
Yeah, that's the way I would read it.
That's how
Well,
I read it.
I
Okay.
read it differently and I think we should be
We
more
did,
specific.
Put in as the signing of this lease.
Well, 365 days of the lease's effective date.
Right.
It's already defined in the lease.
Okay. I would like to say, in addition to all permits, improvements must be made with Harbor District review and written acceptance. I don't want secondhand stuff going in here while there's a luxurious RV park going in just a few hundred feet north of us. And this is where you send the cheapo people. I want to
That
make
was my
sure,
thing. Yeah,
I
the
want to make
monopoly.
sure we have good design and appropriate maintenance at all times. And we should, again, it's only fair to the tenant to put this in writing for them to be able to read it. Moving down to restroom, facility, shower, paragraph B. Landlord based on facility use, and may require tenant at tenant's sole expense. I want to say at Harbor District sole discretion. Because I don't want him saying, well, I got this landlord or this architect and look at this, isn't it wonderful? And we're going, really? And the outdoor beach shower probably has to be permitted too, given all the water quality control and stuff, and there maybe has to be a filter go in or something. But if you just put in a shower on the end of a hose, I think there's some regulatory agencies that are going to have some problems. So I would like to make sure that we have a permit for that. Under 4, use and maintenance of use and requirements of premises, again, subject to prior written paragraph B, subject to prior written approval at Harbor District sole discretion. And they have the approval of the landlord. But I've seen things go on where people argue whether the Harbor District can be argued with, and they like to bring their experts in and argue. I want it clear. It's our sole discretion, not your experts. I've seen it.
I mean, basically, we're trying to take biases out of there as much as possible.
I am trying to give us the upper hand on all of these things. Because I've seen how people can argue. Equivalent standards. Moving on to 3, which was lithium-ion batteries, and the tenant shall assume all responsibility and liability for any of these things that are on the ground, on the leased area. Unlawful discrimination and harassment on page 3, paragraph H. It's a really nice paragraph. I don't want to be a co-suit on any of these things. I want the tenant to know it bears all liability and responsibility for these practices. I don't want to be an also named. Then there's the parking.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure,
on that?
go.
Jim, for that, section G under hazardous materials, the last sentence that says notwithstanding the foregoing, tenant may use ordinary and customary materials reasonably required in the normal course of the tenant's operation, so long as such use is in compliance with the applicable laws and regulations. So why is that a may use versus shall use? Because may, I mean, if you're out of compliance, it's probably because, or possibly because of some materials that were already used. So why is that? I mean, I don't know, Tricia, is that standard, this may versus the shall or
I
must?
think it's saying it's permitted, right? May, you can, you may be doing it. However, the conditions under which you may do it require that you do it in compliance with the law, rather than if it were to read tenant shall use, it's almost as though the contract is requiring them to use those materials, then you're not demanding that they use the materials. You're saying it's permissive, and then you're specifying the conditions for their use.
I've added the line on that, tenant assumes all liability and responsibility.
Based on the may, I would put that, but
There is a broad indemnity provision in this contract that already has them assume all the liability for any of the activities related to use of the presence, as well as the activities of their invitees, their tenants, guests, and everyone. It's a very broad indemnification for anything that occurs on the land.
The most memorable lawsuits that I lost because of insurance was when an employee held her hand up to a heat lamp until she got a blistered injury from the heat lamp. There were witnesses. And then she sued us. She won. This is why I'm saying things need to be written over and over. We had in our employee handbook about everything having to be used in a safe manner. I admit, my immediate thought was to fire her. Couldn't trust her around a heat lamp. Her life was clearly going to be a problem. So again, I'm very concerned about making sure that things are repeated so that we stay out of hot water. And that's the same for the unlawful discrimination and harassment. I've been also sued on things where I had no control over what was going on. Don't want us to be there. Again, on page 5 under utilities, not only was this permitting, limiting the utilities that could be there, there's no penalty for the tenant if they are in default on any of their utilities. I know of one restaurant that was that was with the same group that I worked with, but different owners, that was 3 years behind on their trash. We need to put in that if any utilities are in default, the tenant shall pay the district the cost to put them in good standing, plus the cost of our Harbor District staff to be able to do that. We should be paying staff to remedy what tenant has put in default. Glad to see the COLA there. The security deposit on page 5, it starts with paragraph 9. I don't have anything on page 5 until we get down to page 6, maintenance of security deposit. You're expecting a security deposit with the green light lease extensions to be. It's a problem we had to act on and use the maintenance of the security deposit to be for $30,000 to be good for 20 years. That deposit should be added to with the cost of construction. If you kept up, I don't want us to get slammed by inflation and building costs. Under late charges and interest, tenant shall pay landlord as additional rent the sum of 5% for such overdue amount as liquidated damages. There's no deadline on that. There's no time limit. It needs to be cumulative, and it needs to have each month or something, because and it also needs for late payments, needs to cover our staff costs. Those are in the rental agreements for my houses. That's a normal thing. And I'm not asking for anything out of norm.
There is a provision on that if you look in section 19 about defaults with respect to monetary.
They should all be together, in my opinion.
Security deposit, the rent goes up every year, so his security deposit of 2 months' rent would be increasing every year as well.
We need to say that.
We have to renew, having had a contract with this harbor for over 2 decades. Your contract comes out every year for revision and signature.
And security deposit needs to go up, and it needs to be notice needs to be given in the lease.
What do you mean needs to go up? The security deposit is based on, I'm assuming.
2
the
months
security
this year.
This year, I know.
But
it's
in 15 years.
Oh, if we renew it.
If that's what I said, with the
Yeah.
green light renewals that are in this lease. Moving on to page 7. Again, it's just overstatement, but page 7, tenant's responsibility for maintenance and repairs. I want it to be quite clear that the tenant shall insure the Harbor District on any workers' comp or any kind of claims that are made because of somebody working on here. Then we get to page 8, item 2 and 3. I want to know if $2 million for each occurrence in a combined single limit is, and at all of these figures, is adequate. I don't think it is. I think that's an old figure that may have worked in 2020 or before. But the cost of things, I just had to have my car repaired because I backed into my own damn tree. And it was $35,000 because of all the electronics that are in the exterior of a car that had to be adjusted and everything. I want to make sure I'd like to have a review by an insurance company to know this.
And we did do that with this section with SDRMA.
Right, so that's what I was gonna ask. So these numbers are from SDRMA? Jim, the $2 million for each occurrence, $2 million for personal injury liability, for the aggregate. I mean, that obviously for the other two, and then one for damage to rented premises. Are these numbers here from SDRMA? Where did we get these numbers?
Yes, SDRMA, we consulted them, we provided this provision with them, and this is what was,
And this is as of how far back?
And this is more than
the
double.
last 6 months.
This is
Okay.
double what
Perfect.
all the other CDPs in the harbor were formerly written for.
Yeah, just wanted to understand where the information came from.
Right. Please explain to me what item C says. It simply says property insurance. Property insurance against all risks to loss to any tenant improvements or betterments at full replacement cost with no co-insurance penalty provision. Who's responsible for that? Us, them? It doesn't say.
Says that these are all the tenants, each one of these are the tenant's responsibility. If you look at the intro paragraph to that section.
Page 7,
To be
number
named additional
16.
insured on all policies.
That's right there.
Okay,
So shall.
And keep in force the following, and then those lists.
that's good. We have all of those, then we've got certificate. This one hit a hot button. I've been sued on this one when I had a business. Certificate of insurance for claims arising out of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Tenant shall at its sole cost and expense obtain an insurance policy with coverage for claims arising out of the ADA. That's good. In the event that tenants cannot obtain such coverage, tenant shall provide notice to landlord along with an explanation about tenant's inability to obtain such coverage. Oh, gee, nobody would give me coverage. Landlord may this is my problem, the landlord may at its sole and absolute discretion waive the requirement to obtain insurance coverage for claims arising out of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Assign away one of the major income sources for shyster attorneys.
So okay, how does that work, Tricia, considering?
So there's a requirement that they have ADA insurance. And this provision isn't out. I think it's to allow the district, it's my understanding there have been tenants in the past who simply said, we're unable to get the insurance. At some point, it may not be possible. Either they can't find somebody who's willing to sell them that insurance, or it's prohibitive, cost prohibitive. This merely gives the district the ability, and its absolute discretion, it couldn't be more clear, to look at those facts and circumstances at that time and say, we're willing to waive it. But the district could also say, we're not willing to waive it, and insist that they have the ADA insurance. It's my understanding from, and Jim can correct me, that it's more of just a practical approach to this, that some tenants may not be able to get the insurance.
You have had a couple of ADA lawsuits here. And so that, I don't know how, I mean, I get the practicality of it, Tricia, but the reality of it is it does cost money for the district and taxpayers. And that's at the sole discretion of the party that can't pay it or get it. So the risk 100% is on the harbor district.
It's at the district's sole discretion to waive it.
That's what we're
That's-
saying.
Mhm.
The district could evaluate the circumstances at that time and decide whether or not that the district wants to waive.
We're saying we should not have that line in there. District to be at risk.
Do we have any examples of where we waived that requirement?
With the catch, the
Bathroom.
new updated catch lease,
Yeah,
it was added that this same paragraph was added for them to get ADA insurance.
and they couldn't get it,
And they weren't able to get it.
so we end up building it.
And then
Well, that was because of the lawsuit.
they were going
Oh,
to,
that was-
That's
okay.
because we had those ADA lawsuits in the bathroom that Tom and I had to deal with.
and during our waiver process, if they say we can't get it, we can always go get the insurance and charge them as part of the waiver.
Well, so that doesn't read like that here.
Well, I think it gives an option later
Our sole
on.
discretion is we can do whatever we want.
Yeah, but it doesn't say that the cost would be passed. I mean, okay. I get that the cost would be passed to the tenant, which ultimately would be passed to the consumers if you think about it, right? So, I don't know. I mean, how do you get around?
I think I'd say if they can't get ADA coverage, their lease is terminated in 30 days. Because this is, you can come up with any excuse and the Harbor District will consider your excuses.
If the Harbor District declines to waive the requirement, then it's a default. We notify them of the default and we follow the default procedures.
Right. Saying that the Harbor District hasn't done that, even though we have been in that situation. And then again, that risk goes to the district and the residents, the whole county, I mean, all the taxpayers. I don't know, Catherine may have a different concern. Mine is just past performance from what I have seen being on this board. So George, you asked.
Yeah.
But it seems we have the process in place in this new way of doing business and redoing these leases, that process is there. Yes, I don't have the history. You made mention that, this board or the Harbor District did not apply a lot of that in the past. The processes are there right now, and it'll be up to us, general manager, to monitor that and to make sure that if that's not complying, we do the third, because I agree, if they can't get the ADA and we don't want to give it to them, I mean, they can't operate.
Well,
I mean,
I can just see some soft-hearted board going, oh, you poor thing. We'll just pick up your insurance and we'll bill you for it. And then there is a claim. ADA, you can get lawsuits for having your countertop a quarter inch too high or too low. You can ADA lawsuit for having your parking lot 1 degree out of the compliance. This is, I've seen it happen so many times. You can get a ADA lawsuit for having your signs at the wrong height. These are all things that you can get sued for with damages. It was a big industry in Solano County. There was an attorney and his handicapped brother.
let's assume somebody sues us and the landlord has their insurance. The tenant has their insurance, okay, so we're okay there.
Right.
But then let's say that the tenant cannot get their insurance. We have the process in place to just say, we shut it down. I mean, see, this doesn't have to do anything with getting sued. We're gonna get sued regardless in certain of these things, and that just happens. But this is their requirement to get the insurance, and if they can't get it, do we want to keep them as a tenant? That's right.
Because
Do
that's
we
your
want to
risk.
keep them as a tenant? Because overall, they've been a good tenant and maybe we can help out. So there's options there that maybe we need to just spell out in one of our other policies. You know, when we look at not only for this tenant, but for others, what happens if they don't comply with, can't get the insurance?
I agree, and I'd love to see.
Doesn't have to be part of this. I think this just can direct us to the,
I'm okay, I'm actually kind of
Okay, I
okay
feel that.
with this, but because I think, again, Catherine, we have to balance things with, that enterprise side of the budget. I mean, is it gonna be?
We are getting paid on an annual basis far less than we would lose in a lawsuit.
Yeah, that's true too.
I tend to look at the long-term protections for the district. The short-term dollars are lost in the wind with a lawsuit. I've seen what they cost. And, I mean, I'm only, this is why at the beginning I said I'd like another real estate attorney to review this, to point out the problems. We've already found typos and misstatements. And if I'm not an attorney, I don't pretend to be an attorney, I'm generally just a troublemaker. And I can read holes. And most of this is good, but there's just some things in here that I believe, like if it said the landlord has sole and absolute discretion, may waive the requirements to obtain insurance coverage for claims, then we should put our policy in there on which a decision would be made as guidance to the board.
So Jim and Tricia, who is the I know the Harbor District is the landlord, but is this an operations matter where this would be the sole discretion of the general manager, or should this kind of thing be brought to the board? Waiver of this?
Oh, it doesn't come to the board.
The other thing is, seems like if we just added and charge tenant, we could,
something.
we could find our insurance at any price and charge the
Right.
tenant.
Right, that's what we were talking about, yeah.
Mhm.
I
should
would
be
be
there,
okay,
yes.
I agree, because that.
So I think that's doable here, but I
Right.
think we need to look at the other general policy of the harbor, so it applies to all of, anybody else too. It's just, shouldn't just be in this document. We ought to have someplace
What we're
else.
trying to balance is the enterprise side of the budget. I keep bringing that up because that's really the one place that we have some control over as an agency with risk, financial position, risk and financial position of the Harbor District, which also means risk and financial position of the taxpayers. So that's.
And
what
also
we
delete
have-
the last sentence.
Which the landlord, okay, so then if you deleted the last sentence, then what are you saying? That if you don't have ADA, then you're not gonna be a tenant, or your lease gets canceled?
It's a requirement of the.
I mean, to me, I can see the benefit of that, but I can also, what?
It would have to be the last two sentences.
Or it's two sentences.
What I mean.
But right now, it leaves the district an option to work with the tenant if you leave it as it is. But if the board wants to have
I'm not sure.
just a drop hammer, like Catherine's recommending, so that future boards don't get soft, we just delete the last two sentences.
I think that's better unless you put in the whole, add to that about what the standards are for us waiving
What
that.
would
Do we,
constitute-
by the way, do we, I'm sure we have ADA insurance. And we even add a rider for an individual business.
We talked to, SCRMA, it wasn't an individual business, it was just part of our property.
As a whole package.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, Catherine brings up a good point about what would require us to look at to waive something like this, to waive, I'm sorry, to waive, so that we can determine whether or not a lease should be terminated or not renewed versus working with the tenant, which I would like to work with the tenant because I think in this environment, the ADA environment is very hostile to businesses right now. And we do need some of this revenue, but I want us to be more protected than based on what this language is currently saying. So maybe we do need to have a meeting where we provide guidelines on what would allow us to feel comfortable waiving this provision.
Right now, as the way it's written, the guidelines are whatever we define it as.
I know, but that's what I'm saying. There's nothing that's codified by this board in terms of defining what those guidelines are. So I agree with Catherine about future boards, and we're not trying to tie the hands of future boards, but I just think if you have ambivalence for something, because we've had to deal with ADA lawsuits here, that it's just going to muddy the water even more. And so maybe I don't know, Tom, how do you want to do this? Do we want to have a meeting later on, keep this in and maybe say something like charge the tenant or something like what you had said, and then we meet and talk about what these.
What I'm proposing is we have a couple of Scribner's notes. So the knot on the utilities, adding the lithium battery.
Wow. Provision number 9 in the personal guarantee, I just want to understand that a little more.
Yeah, so does have to be revised a tiny bit before the board will accept it. Couple things, I think for the sake of our discussion, let's try a motion to extend the meeting for 15 minutes. And if we have to, and then I kept waiting for Dan to show up. And I was gonna add a public comment, so I'm gonna add the public comment now before we run out of time. Fran Pollard called the district with the following comments: there's too many handicap parking spaces at the RV park. They need to have more
Show
public
me a 9.
parking spaces available. And we need to make public comments over Zoom again. So let's, does 15 minutes sound good?
Sure,
Kate?
so that means we would adjourn at 6:45, so that gives us an extra, basically 30 minutes from now.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion to extend the meeting by 15 minutes.
I'll second.
All right, can we have a roll call, please?
President Mathush,
Aye.
Commissioner Zemke,
I,
Commissioner Domrat,
Aye.
Mr. Shane Corrali,
Aye.
Mr. Slater Carter.
I want to know, and it was a question from the public, what is the urgency of approving this right now? Tenant is on a month-to-month lease. So,
Then this lease expires at the end of the month. Well,
At the end of the month.
we would have to issue another extension.
yes,
And other than that, it's just the lease payments. They would continue on with the
old one,
$2,500 a month.
$500, yeah.
as opposed to 15,000,
Yeah.
which seems like we're taking
Well,
a
we can-
short-term amount of money not to have a review of this lease by a third-party real estate attorney.
The lease was drafted and originally drafted and put together. It was forwarded to RWG, which did forward it to a legal realtor, our realtor specialist. Both that I got the comments back from RWG. I integrated those comments into the lease.
In it,
So some of the typos are not necessary, or they're mine. I thought I caught them all, but I missed the unlimited. I've read this thing so many times.
No.
right, no, it's.
And I knew what you meant, but I mean,
Yeah. that-
on its face,
Share it,
someone.
and it'll be corrected.
Yeah, no, when I read it, I read not limited to, and then I happened to look at the paper upside down, sort of across the table, and I went, wait, there's no not there.
I'll have to start reading upside down.
I do what I have to do to get my attention. I find the name of their business, and this is just for me, but Pillar Point Harbor LLC is very confusing to me, considering
Probably
we're,
their license name already.
Well-
In the process. I've read
The
through
board
it.
approved that name under a lot of discussion.
okay.
In terms of
My bigger concern is with the extension of the lease. It's green lights all the way. If you're not in default on the lease, you get an automatic green light. You get another 5 years. I want at the sole discretion of the Harbor District to extend it. I don't want it to be a green light.
Okay.
Well, that was actually the intent, based on the notes that we had, that I have. That a lot of it.
No, and the board directed me to, or gave me parameters to negotiate. Part of that was double green light. We negotiated that double green light. It was refused. So when I came back with the board, I let the board know that it was refused and that it's in this draft lease. If the board disagrees with it, they could turn down the lease. I will tell you that if we require a double green light on all the extensions, they will not sign the lease.
The alternative to that would then be to go to arbitration.
More than likely go to arbitration, yes.
No, they're on a month-to-month lease now, so why would it go to arbitration?
They are a holdover tenant.
And so is that why there's one lease that goes until 2025 and then two-year leases? Why is that?
The original two, we started with negotiating with a 1-year lease. However, the tenant is investing several $100,000 as soon as the lease gets signed on the improvements, including compliance with all the CDP. And they would like a lease that's at least long enough to recoup their investment.
And we need to see their paperwork.
So we agreed
That's
to-
why number 9
why
is so
we-
important.
During the last discussions, we agreed to the 2-year with the 3-year extension.
So,
The additional 3-year terms, that could be modified, whatever the board would like to see. But
So-
5-year terms.
but again, if a tenant is,
5-year terms.
they're working well, they're paying their lease tenant, or they're paying their lease terms, it's increasing by at least 3% every year. Good tenant. If they're not, and they're in violation of their lease,
right,
we'll terminate the lease.
right, but so I'm looking at my notes. And it says additional 5-year extension at the sole discretion of the Harbor District,
Correct.
which means the general manager. Because this wouldn't necessarily have to come back to the harbor board, all that. It would be nice to get the updates, right? And then extension / new lease shall not be unreasonably withheld. So that was what I had as the direction. And,
And the board
I
directed me to remove
understand.
that language, so that language
Well-
was removed,
Good, I saw that.
which part?
unreasonably withheld.
Yeah, it will, shall not be, yeah. But I thought that the holdup was the number of years and the price. Not the sole discretion part of this.
No, it was, the board wanted double green light, and that's what was presented. They refused. It was a deal breaker, so I brought back that to the board, and that's what we have right now.
I know, but I just,
Well,
I
we got, the
thought it was
Harbor District
price.
has to approve each renewal though, correct?
well, I don't know,
No.
it doesn't,
That
that's,
I
isn't
need
what
to
it
approve
says.
And
that's
if
right.
they're in default, then we don't renew.
Okay, the default part, yeah.
I know, but we just,
Otherwise,
I
we
don't,
renew.
had a default issue that was not handled correctly, in my opinion. So this is not a knock on you, Jim, this at all. I just want. We are, as a board, are responsible for this ultimately, right? And I think that when, and the directions aren't followed in a way that I think, well, and maybe in my mind or my opinion, and others may have a different opinion, maybe something like this should come back to the board, because I've actually heard from the public, and not here with Ed, who had the same concerns that Ed had in terms of, well, why isn't, I felt the same way. Why isn't this able to go out into a free market bidding situation? Right? That's been my stance
And
from the
mine.
very, very beginning, not with just this lease, but with the other leases as well. Right? And so to leave it up to, and this is gonna go past you and future general managers, but to leave it up to the operational, the sole discretion based on operations may not be in the best interest of the harbor district. No, I'm not even talking about you, Jim. I'm talking about, where does the board weigh in as representatives of the public for something like this if we have to renew? Because technically right now, the board doesn't have to be involved with the renewal. That's how I understand it. I could be wrong. So
I don't
correct me if
read it.
I'm wrong on
Unless
this.
they're in default, the lease will be renewed. Yes.
Right.
So you're
So
correct.
where is the board's input on renewal? Or not even input, I don't even care if we're giving input or, I just care that it comes before us so that we understand the whole macro scenario.
And we
Because
can-
I'm going based on the
And we
catch
can,
leases
we
right
can
now.
draft a policy for all leases upon renewal must be reviewed and approved by the board or
That's,
reviewed by the board. And that could be, that's a policy district for the district.
If they so choose, if we so choose, if the board doesn't want to review it and it's a clear violation, it goes to fall.
No, not even violation.
no.
Every
I'm
lease
talking
renewal
about-
that,
have to be.
every lease
Yeah.
renewal that comes to the district must be presented to the board.
And I'm a little gun shy,
Yeah.
George, just because of the history.
It's
we have
informational.
and
Oh,
the
informational,
situation with
okay.
Catch lease, which is, I was not happy about. I mean, I think the public probably heard my displeasure and unhappiness about that. Anyway, so I would feel more comfortable if we had a requirement that the board looked at the leases before renewal, and give input in determining if the lease should be renewed. And this is not a knock on Keith. Let me make that very clear. This is for every lease.
Correct.
This would be a standard for every lease, and it should have been the standard
That's,
I don't have a big problem with that.
for all.
that would be a
before.
separate district policy.
Separate policy.
Well, yeah. So, but we need to add that to this.
And the board can
current-
direct me to
to-
develop that policy.
Well, so Jim, how does that work for retroactively for the catch lease?
Those leases are all governed by their terms. So even if you did have a policy, you could review them, but you wouldn't be able to. I mean, you're governed by the terms of your contract. And so if you have, we'd look at what the renewal provisions
I should
were.
have brought that up at that time too.
Well, that's a shorter term lease, I believe.
That's true. So let me ask you this. I know we're not talking about that lease, but we're talking about leases in general. So let's say that lease comes up for renewal, right? In the shorter term than this possibly. Could we add that language then, same one where it's, the board must review?
We don't need to add it to the lease
Well,
if the board is going to review it, but
I heard
but the
Trish say
terms of the
we do.
leases will
and
control.
that's not what I heard from Trish just now.
So I don't have that contract in front of me, but we would look at what the contract,
I'm talking about that contract.
I want this to be a
Talking about-
standard for, no, I want this language to be a standard for all the leases. And right now, we have another lease
Okay,
that
now
did
that's
not
also
have that.
off topic because we should be talking about this lease and review leases at another meeting on an agendized item.
Well, we're
Perhaps
talking-
be
Tom,
more
We're talking
proper.
about this lease.
We're
Tom.
talking-
So I understand your question, Virginia, and I'll give you a two-part answer that addresses the two issues. One, if the board would like to know when a lease is coming up for renewal and get a brief on the renewal the renewal terms of the renewal, it'll be all our leases, that would be an informational brief to the board. The other side, where the board wants the authority to say no, the double green light, that would have to be in the.
Or
lease.
say yes.
Mhm.
It's not.
That would have to be the double green light.
Right, and so I get what you're saying, Tom, but what we're doing now may be creating the standard for all leases, but right now we have a lease that doesn't allow for that. But Jim says it allows for it. I'm hearing from Trish that it does not.
It doesn't allow, for as drafted, it doesn't allow the board the discretion to review and deny the
That's
renewal.
right. So if.
Unless they're in default.
This contract, it would not be the same and standardized as we have in a current contract. Or current lease.
Once
We
they-
have a current lease right now. If we included that provision in this current lease, right, before we approve it, this is not gonna be at the same standard as the lease that we currently have with the retail store, the Catch. That's
Difference-
gonna be at odds. And so this is something exactly what we've been trying to
Yes,
prevent.
it is at odds because it's a different piece of property in different
I understand.
circumstances.
And so what I'm trying to do,
It's a
Tom,
lease.
is this lease could be the standard for, this could be the standard for language that could move forward for all the other ones. And we now, sounds like we'd have to add that lease if,
When you renew.
with the other one. So there are two things. If we want to add that language into this lease, that's one thing. That's one point. Do we want to do that?
Yes,
And if we do want to do that, would that be the standard for all the leases? Because if that's the case, then we have to put that language in the lease when we renew the other lease with Catch.
well, and I
So
have,
if
I
we
have
want
a
it to be a
language.
standard, that's a bigger question, but that applies to this lease because this lease, Tom, will provide the standard for the other leases, technically speaking.
And it's a 20-year lease, the way it's written. I have a suggestion and under renewal, that any renewal is subject to lease modifications as determined by the Harbor District and its board. So that we, because I don't like ironclad stuff. It's kind of like, I want the ultimate safety. But I'm driving a 1945 pickup truck with no airbags, no seatbelts, and yet I think I'm safe. No, I want 2024 safety standards in this lease.
Oh.
And just because it's an old lease, I don't want to think I'm safe. We need to protect the district. And so I think language, subject to, the lease is subject to modifications at the sole discretion of the, or maybe not that,
We're
but
expanding the definition of the Harbor District as a lessor.
yes.
What was that? Are we out of bounds?
Oh, no,
Tricia,
no,
okay.
you're not. No, I just wanted to make sure that Jim, because he's the one who's been negotiating, and in my view, that provision would be the double green light that he said that the negotiation, that were a concern in the negotiations.
Which part?
If you gave the district the discretion to negotiate new terms in future leases, then it essentially is a double green light.
I want tenants to believe and understand who's the boss here. Yeah, we need their business. We do a lot to bring it in, and we're working on things that we don't want to lose, that we want to bring more business in, like education and entertainment and parking and stuff like that. But, and we're not asking people to pay for it. We want them to be always working with us. I consider not adhering to the CDP from 2019, rubbing our nose in our shit. You know, that, I don't even train dogs that way, and we were ignored. The board was ignored for 6 years. History has some proof. And so I would like to see, you can negotiate a little bit on the language in that term. Because I don't write legal.
So Tricia, so the current lease, where's that page? I was turning it to, about the sole discretion language, right? They wanted this. So what is the double green light part in your opinion? That we would negotiate,
Go to
renegotiate?
page
I
4.
can't find the page and I just had it here.
Go to page 4 under paragraph 5 term.
No, anyway, it's, I have it on another page. Anyway, what do you think they would consider the double green light to be? Because
Right now, they have the ability to renew the lease as long as they're not in default. And as long as they provide notice within the notice window,
okay.
it's their right to renew.
They were okay with this language and landlord may in its sole and absolute discretion waive the, I'm sorry, that's ADA, sorry, I'm sorry. I'm just lost my pages, now I'm losing my train of thought, but okay. What I'm saying is that, that if the harbor district is the one who's able to determine, you know, whether or not to renew the lease, that should come to the board and not the general manager from an operations standpoint, viewpoint.
The lease does not require any discretion on whether or not to renew under these terms. It's merely showing that they're in compliance with the lease and that they've provided notice.
Going has a solution.
My feeling is we've got a pretty close to a complete lease and we've got some small changes. Are these Scribner's changes that will have no effect? Do we need, does the board want a clean copy with these additions that have been noted? Can we set up a Monday meeting? Can this be completed by Monday with changes to the board? I'm not in favor of going to another attorney. I've seen the bills that we pay RWG now. They're a great firm and I've got total confidence in them.
They lost.
So
We have lost it. We have lost lawsuits and it's been expensive. $1,000 to get a second opinion might save us a whole lot.
I don't know who's gonna review this lease and read it for $1,000.
I can find one.
Hiring another attorney.
No, but what if we lose?
Ask for a motion
Well,
to see if the
yeah,
board
I
wants to do that.
I guess my concern is, if we send this to a new attorney, they rewrite it, then we go, then
Back and forth.
general manager goes back to them, they throw up their hands, say, no, this isn't what I agreed to. We're back and forth again. I mean, we do at some point hope to reach agreement with.
We can
the
set
tenant.
parameters on what a second attorney would review. Certainly the double green light would be worthwhile to get another
That's
opinion.
what
on.
I think. The double green light and the,
Light is not a legal issue. I understood that that's a business term in negotiating. Right? It's not a drafting issue as much as it is, as I'm understanding the issue, correct me if I'm wrong. It's a business issue that Jim has negotiated with the tenant. So another attorney is not going to be able to overcome that negotiating obstacle.
Might be another way to phrase it that might be more comfortable for the tenant. Certainly you could ask the tenant what his attorney recommends as how to break this impasse. That would certainly be, he has very good attorneys.
Point where we can do Scribner's changes or do we need a complete rewrite?
Tom,
The
I think
Scribner's-
it's not just
I have two
Scribner's
Scribner's
changes.
Changes of the utilities and the lithium batteries.
But what we're discussing is not just Scribner's changes and minor edits.
We're not, but remember, we're not changing the ultimate content of the lease. What we're asking to have written into it is protective language for the district.
Well, except that I think, and I look at this, that the tenant may have the expectation that they're getting a 20-year lease.
Right, but that's not our
And that's
intent.
not our intent. So I
Right.
mean, there may be a bigger issue here than we're talking about.
I agree with you.
If
though.
that's a deal breaker for them. I mean, we're giving them I think what we're saying is they have that 5-year assured lease. But after that, we want the ability to say no.
Right, we
But the-
never, ever, ever intended for this to go beyond 5 years right now. In terms of before we review it again. It was never intended for this to be a long-term 20-year lease.
So let me play devil's advocate and I'm the tenant.
Trish.
I'm gonna interrupt you for just a moment
We're
and say
running
that,
out of time.
we meant to add 15 more minutes to our parking meter.
I'll just move, add 20 minutes, stop at 7.
That's, no, we're already at 6:45. 15
No, it's
makes us to
6.
7.
It's 6:39, 6:40.
We're already extended until 6:45.
Oh, then I'll move to add 15 minutes so that we extend to 7 PM.
Every second.
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 Do we have any idea how much the tenant makes up this property?
Aye.
Trying to do this.
Commissioner Zemke,
Aye.
Commissioner Donrat,
Aye.
Commissioner Jane Crowley,
Aye.
Commissioner Slater Carter.
Aye.
In the process.
What was I saying now? No, let's pretend I'm the tenant. We had some history. We want to fix that problem. You're giving me 2 years. 1 year actually to do all that stuff, the 365 days to comply with the.
Agreed to.
And then I'm gonna put in $100,000 into that effort in that first year. And if something goes belly up, I want to be able to recoup that. I would like, and if I complied with everything, did everything great, paid my $15,000, a month and everything else, why would my landlord not want me to just automatically kind of go forward?
We're not saying that that's not the case.
Okay, so no,
What
so
I'm
this is
saying
at the end of the 2 years. So there's 2 periods here. There's one they call the initial term. That's 2 years and then the 3-year additional. Those two together is the initial term. Maybe we implement what we're talking about at the end of the initial term.
That's that was my intent.
Oh, okay. I
Not,
thought you
not
meant
the
after
end
the
of the
first
2
2
years.
years.
No, I'm sorry. I
Then
wasn't
that's my
clear.
mistake.
No, I was
Right.
thinking at the end
That's-
of the 3 years.
Yeah.
I'm with you. If I'm investing in all of
You
this
wanna-
and it's not my property, I would have the same concerns, okay? Because I want the tenant to succeed, because if
That's
they
right.
succeed, the Harbor District
If they
succeeds.
show that they
I
do,
would-
there shouldn't be any reason that they don't expect that they would get the next 5 and then the next 5 and then the third
But
5.
here in my notes, it's the additional 5-year extension. So that's
The three.
beyond
Right.
the 3, the
Wait,
beyond the
at
2
that
plus the
point-
3.
At that point, but
After the
Yeah.
first 5 years, so, but my notes have here, it says additional 5-year extensions, blah, 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 that's the provision so it's beyond the first 5 years. So it's the
we also have to
addition.
comply with the lease
Of course we do.
and what we default,
You know
or
what?
if they
You
default.
should-
Yeah. So we're gonna look at it, and if they, we'll be sued
If we did.
if we just, for some reason, I don't like the guy because he drives a blue truck,
Right.
we're getting that now. So
Yeah,
I think we're fine, kind of where we are, if we put in that thing that we do get that chance to review and approve at that, right after the initial term, and then for every
After
5 years.
Yeah, I wasn't clear. So it was
Okay.
the
Yeah.
first 2 and you have the 3,
That-
so it'd be the first 5.
Does that make any sense?
I understand what you're saying.
Does it make any sense?
It will be difficult
Well, what
to,
do they have to hide then?
nothing.
Then why it
hiding-
shouldn't be difficult? Because
They're
it's just-
hiding their finances.
Well, yeah, it's their business. They're not hiding, I don't feel that they're hiding anything from us on a renewal. They just want to have that
assurance.
assurance
I
that
get it.
they'll be able to renew.
Yeah.
That's
But
it.
I need to have the assurance, Jim, that we're not gonna be in the same trap that we've been in for all these other leases that were the bad leases that we're now trying to unwind and get out of. And get out of is the wrong word. What we're trying to do is, we have an opportunity to start fresh. And so we wanna do it
Yes.
right. Yeah, not with I'm talking about all the leases in general. So, and I'm maybe just putting everything together because I think the board has been concerned about all the leases in general. And this just happens to be one lease that we're talking about right now. Right? So I understand, I mean, I'm a business person. I understand where the business person or the tenant is coming from, right? But we also have an obligation beyond the business parameters to our constituents to make sure that you know, we're getting what we're getting, because as we know, process for like CDPs or permits, not on our end, but in general, can stall things. And then all of a sudden, okay, well, it's lapsed here, it's lapsed there. Oh, well, since it's already lapsed, maybe we don't have to be in compliance. I mean, it's like property abandonment. I mean, you know, like the squatter issue right now where, oh, no one lives there, so I guess I can live there. You know, oh, this hasn't been taken care of, so I guess it's okay. And it's not okay if something doesn't happen. I'm just a little sensitive to it because we had to deal with the catch lease,
The,
not with the current tenants, but in general with the previous
The
Going
past
back-
tenants, yeah. No, I'm done. Just to be clear, George, I'm not talking about the first 2 years. I'm talking about
Well, that's
the
fine.
2 plus the 3. And my note says the additional 5-year extensions. So it's beyond the first 5 years. Sorry, Jim.
to go back to the, to earlier to what Commissioner Zemke referenced and what's been talked about is the arbitration aspect of it also plays in trying to protect the district against an arbitration, which could cost the district a lot of money or could not. We don't know. That's a risk that we would take.
We take that
So
every
we're,
time.
so we're entering into this new lease with that in the background, giving the tenant a new lease at current, above current market value and the terms. Now, if the board doesn't want to agree to 3 5-year extensions, the board can direct me to do 1 5-year extension or 2 5-year extensions or no extensions.
Are you saying those extensions should be automatic? Because that's not what we
Yes,
intended.
in the way we're using the word terms automatic, yes, unless they're in breach of their lease.
But that's not what we intended. That is
Correct.
not what we intended.
Correct.
And the tenant should have been told that during negotiations, that the
They were.
spirit of our intentions was not that.
That they were.
Okay,
I was
so then
extremely
why
clear
is
with
it a
them.
problem?
They disagreed with it.
They're in agreement with the lease. They want us to approve this.
Correct.
because it has a double green light. Or, yeah, no, it has a single green light, only
Right.
then.
If they're in compliance with their lease.
If they're in
If they're, right,
compliance,
and
yeah.
that's a condition of that.
Right.
Right, so I get the condition. But I just, maybe I'm missing the double green light thing here.
Now, the double green light means that we get to turn it to red too, not just the tenant. The tenant only needs to give us a certain number of days to get out of it. And then
What the board
we're,
wanted was sole authority and discretion to say no without reason on a lease renewal. Now the board can say no to the renewal only if the tenant is found in default.
one of my concerns is following California lease landlord tenant laws as they have changed in the
I
last
see
few
what you're
years.
saying here. Okay.
It is heavily weighted against landlords.
Right. I agree with that.
And it's getting worse. I don't think that climate's gonna change in favor of the
No, I don't
landlord
think
or
it
the
is.
I
landowner.
don't think so either.
But I can see that the legislature would put some requirements on landlords that would then leave us holding the bag, and we don't have the opportunity to even insert it in a lease to protect ourselves.
Insert.
God only knows what the legislature can think of, you know, I was talking to a friend today who was saying they've had to sell real estate and they had to pay the tenants $35,000 to get the tenant to move out. I want to be able, if we have to be able to insert protections for the district, and that's why I think subject to, the lease are subject to lease modifications as determined by the board or by the negotiating team, whatever.
I don't.
But
And I hear you, and
I,
I'm not saying no to it. I'm not, it's not my position to do that. But my interpretation of subject to lease modification turns that into a double green line.
yes.
So I have a little bit of a heartache over the subject to lease modification, Catherine, just because it's so subjective, which I guess is the language,
Well,
right?
let's make it more specific then.
Well, let me ask you this, I'm looking at the additional 5-year extensions, I can see where that sole discretion could be troubling for the tenant. My whole thing was that the harbor district would be, as the landlord, would be broadened to the harbor board.
Well, it's
I don't
still,
want
it
us to
just,
have-
but that just means that the harbor board has to rubber stamp it.
Or at least discuss it, but the sole discretion thing, I can see, I mean, I get your concern, Catherine, about boards, but I can see a board saying, well, we don't want any businesses there.
That's true.
And that would be problematic too.
Maybe they would have to buy the business out then to,
Or they can just say, at the sole discretion of the harbor district, we're not gonna renew the lease because we philosophically do not want any businesses, we don't want any growth, we don't want this, we don't. And so I'm not for that either. So that's the flip side, because I'm now understanding, I can now see the sole, I wasn't thinking of the sole discretion language, I was thinking of broadening the harbor district definition, who's the lessor.
no, I think that, as a landlord, and I understand what businesses, the risk that businesses are under. I've been taking those risks for 50 years. Sometimes I won, sometimes I lost. But it was always having calculated the risks and knowing what losses I could stand. That said, I'm looking at calculating the risk to see, if nothing else, part of this should be able to see, we need to see a profit and loss or a tax statement. The tax statement is a public document.
Not their P and L, no, not their income taxes, but not
The court,
all
yeah,
of the other stuff that.
right. I'm not asking for that. I just want to know what kind of net income this property is bringing in. I think that's a fair question.
Again, you have much more experience and I'm not questioning it from my, so does Virginia and Tom and the rest of the board on this. But from my perspective is this lease, the only thing we're leasing to him is the parcel, the dirt.
Right.
What he does with that dirt is up to him as long as we say what, we have the approval of what that activity is. We're approving him to put an RV park on that dirt. It's already there, so he can continue that RV park, but the only thing he's leasing from the district in this lease is the dirt.
Understand,
So
actually.
that's how I approached it.
Right.
Well, it's more than the
But
dirt.
what if we suddenly get some kind of lawsuit and we need to get sturdy fencing put in? I'd like the tenant to be able to pay for that improvement because he's benefiting from it.
Leave the lease require it. If there's an improvement required by law or regulation, he has to pay for that.
Yeah, we've had that in previous leases.
Yeah. So can I ask a question, for you and Tricia, Jim? Based on this discussion, because I know we've got 7 minutes left, what things do you think have to be changed based on this discussion that you've written down in your notes? I know what I have, but I just want to make sure that we're all on the, I know that like the Scribner's notes, as Tom noted, it's like page 5, number 7, utilities, adding the lithium battery issue, the lithium battery.
My understanding is that the Scribner error of unlimited or limited needs to be corrected. And then also the board as a whole agreed that lithium batteries need to be added to the hazmat state. Beyond that, I don't have any other further comments that the board agreed to.
Something that this
Okay.
long discussion has brought to mind is the ongoing discussion about the loss of shoreline due to sea level rise. I think we need to put in that if sea level rise affects this parcel, which is highly unlikely, we are not responsible to keep shoreline nor the square footage of this land. And we may or may not, again, it's something on the horizon. We haven't lost it. I mean, it's here for us. Let's protect ourselves. You know, those poor people in Pacifica.
I think that there may be a concern ultimately, but we're only looking 20 years out. I mean.
And right now, his previous lease, he was responsible for a full 2 acres, which included the district-owned submerged lands off of Circle Beach. So he was already responsible for submerged lands. We're leasing him that's parcel. He's renting that parcel. If the parcel disappears and is underwater, it's still his parcel. It's just underwater.
Right.
And there is a provision that says he's responsible for all of his own.
So I want to ask the board, because I'm still not 100% feeling great about this additional 5-year extension language. Do y'all want to have Jim include that about broadening the definition of harbor district so that the board is involved? Well, this
That
is.
would be a separate policy document.
I know, but it could be, I mean, we can take out sole discretion. What I'm saying is that this is more or less for the harbor district to make sure that the board is involved with standing, and it could be board updates or whatever.
Right.
That before we renew, after the first 5 years, because it says additional 5 years in my notes, that we bring it back at least for the board to say, okay, well, do we want to, if you say, oh, well, everything's fine, he's been in compliance, blah, 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 it shouldn't be an issue. We should be able to just extend it for another 5 years. Right? And then we can put that in there and then make it a general policy, I guess.
That would be, if that would go back to the same thing with which everyone's talking about modifications to the lease.
No, it's not.
It
I
would
would
be-
never put that language in there.
It would be similar to, but if we put in there that it has to come back to the board for
What is wrong
approval.
with that? Jim, after the catch leases, I am concerned that where the board's intent has not been always followed, and not by you in general. So that's why the safeguard for me is the board.
I'm gonna have to
Yeah,
interrupt
and-
you here for a moment, and we're gonna need, instead of going for another 15, we'll say 30 minutes, and hopefully we finish up in 10. But I need,
I'll move to extend the meeting by 30 minutes.
all right, second,
Second.
roll call, please, Melanie.
President Mathush,
Aye.
Commissioner Zemke,
So
Commissioner Donrat,
Aye.
Commissioner Chang. Slater Carter.
we need to move along.
No, I would like to be able to get a legal opinion. What we're trying to do right now in a public meeting with a lack of information
Negotiate.
is negotiate a lease. And I think it's wrong. And I've been less outspoken on this than maybe I should have. I think that we've all made very good points. And I think we should be looking not for the board, none of us who is an attorney, to come up with solutions that work in a very scrambled legal framework.
Okay, so we have 2 minutes. What was the vote count on that, Melanie?
3-2.
Aye?
Yes,
Okay.
the 7th for
You
7:30.
can cut it off, but okay, you can keep talking.
I can take.
I just thought we had 2 minutes for the 7 o'clock. What was the vote?
Information, we're trying to solve this problem. Now, one of them is an attorney. I agree, I'm repeating myself, and I want fresh information.
Also not seeing a section in there that, however we phrased it with our previous leases, that if state law changes, they're obligated to maintain that. I didn't see that particular
Thank you.
section in there.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah. And,
I mean, how much, I'm just
and
curious, how
it
much
should
does
have
that?
been in there as a standard boilerplate.
If we had an independent legal thing, I don't know, how much does that even cost? I don't know. I haven't even thought about that. But you've brought it up multiple times. So how much does something like that cost? And I'm asking Jim or anyone who knows. 'Cause I don't, I guess it depends.
Provision in section 1, that tenant accepts the premises as is without representation or warranty express or implied, and is subject to all matters of record, and acknowledges and agrees that landlord shall not be under any obligation to improve the premises, including without limitation, making improvements that may be required by law, changes in laws, or new laws.
Right.
But it doesn't say that the tenant needs, if the law changes beyond us, that the tenant needs to do it, does it?
So the tenant is generally, I'll make sure there's a provision in here. Generally, the tenant would be obligated to comply with the law.
You've got that. Sort of.
But it's, let me look at it.
So we only have 2 action items that have come out of this meeting so far, but I still think that we should talk about the additional 5-year extension provision.
Yeah, this doesn't say that the tenant has to specifically keep up with the laws and the changes. That's their sole expense.
But they would,
No, it
they're
implies,
obligated to keep up with the law because it's the law.
but they haven't, and with the
That's-
CDP already for 6 years.
Should we schedule another meeting?
I'd be
I
happy
already
to make
mentioned that.
phone calls to some connections I've got to find another attorney. Just to review this, I'll keep the charge to finding alternatives for double green lights that protect the district as well as the tenant. And any other things that you want me to add to it?
There is a provision, further tenant at its sole cost will comply with all rules and regulations promulgated by the landlord and make all improvements to the premises that may be required by the law, including changes in the law and new laws.
Okay,
Mhm. Yeah.
so it comes back down in our final couple minutes here, hopefully. Do we just, you want to bring back the Scribner's changes for review?
If it's just those 2 Scribner changes, I can make those Scribner changes.
I don't think it should be limited to those 2 right now. We had said this
Well, you
huge
specifically,
discussion.
we have to just list what we want changed.
No, that's what we're asking now, but we had a long discussion about like this language for, you know, who, the harbor district, what's the definition of the harbor district? Is it the general manager and the board, or is it the general manager or the board, or just the general manager for any additional 5-year extensions? We had this discussion on the provision number 9 in the personal
I could address
guarantee.
that one if you want me to. Yeah, it's
Yeah, but-
already in the lease.
Okay,
Do you want me to address that? The harbor district definition?
yeah.
Okay, so the harbor district always, just under general principles, the body, unless you've delegated authority to the general manager, when something requires the action of the harbor district, it requires
The whole
the whole
board.
board. Okay.
Right, I
So
understand
then,
that,
yeah.
Tricia. That's not the problem. The problem is that we have had a lease before where direction from the board was not done. Okay, and so I am concerned that that intent, would you can call it legislative intent or whatever, is not going to be followed, right? For whatever reason. And it's not just not just with this board, other boards too, right? And I don't want that. We're trying to clean up the leases and make sure that moving forward, we've got coherent leases and leases that are suitable or favorable to both or beneficial, maybe is the better word, for both the tenants and the harbor district. It hasn't been like that. I understand what the definition is. I understand that, but that does not necessarily follow the legislative intent of this board, which is an elected board, as you know.
So what I was gonna, I was just gonna finish and say that there's a section in here that you should be aware of that, as it's currently drafted, says that the general manager has the ability to make, section 26, to take actions and make all determinations on behalf of the landlord for purposes of this lease. Now, I will say that that is
That's
very
very now.
right. And so I guess what I'm saying, I'm pointing it out, that this would give this would say, for the purposes of making those determinations, Jim would have the discretion. And that's very customary in
I
leases
understand,
because,
and
okay,
that's
but,
fine to
yeah.
Get away.
Right, and so what I'm saying is what we could do is, and so for the board's discussion here, is if the board doesn't like that, part of the discussion here, a change to the lease that could be directed is revise this provision. So
Right.
that says any decision by the harbor district, I mean, under this lease requires board action. Some legislative bodies would consider that too cumbersome, but I understand what your legislative intent, what your intent is, and so I'm just pointing out how that could be changed here in an effort to keep this moving forward if the board wanted to discuss
That's
whether or
fine.
not to make that change.
I mean, do you want to talk about language now when we vote on it, or how do y'all want to do this?
I want us to have time to see this in writing and think about it.
Okay.
I hate
I agree.
table decisions.
We do table this decision. I'll need authorization to extend the current month-to-month lease that they have now.
I'd like to get this done before June 30th. So like the contract said, it starts June 30th. And right now,
For June
Uh,
13th,
I
14th.
think Monday would be enough time to go over some of these little changes. And I think if we get these things emailed back and forth,
And Catherine's concern that we can come back in closed session, do lease negotiations and give me direction to finalize the lease with the tenant. And then we can go from there. And then come back again to approve that lease.
Right, so if we can, yeah, I mean, I'm gonna be traveling, but I can always zoom in too in an open meeting, right? I'll have an address.
Yes, if we can.
I'll have an address, yeah.
I don't see why we can't be totally completed by next week.
I agree, I agree.
What's that?
We're close.
You're busy Monday?
Oh, I
One
can
more
Monday,
day.
but then after that.
Scrivener changes, but
Yes.
then this number 26, that's an interesting
You
concept.
just can't be there? You can't call in or?
I'll pay him.
Okay.
Wednesday is a holiday too, so
That's correct.
How about Tuesday?
Tuesday I
Monday
can't
to
make it.
give them
Based on
time to
today's
make changes.
conversation,
No, we're
I
talking-
recommend a closed session is our additional next step.
Yeah.
17th,
Yeah, I'm not available on the 17th. 18th would be good for me.
I'm fine,
We're fine on the 18th?
I'm not available the
I'm
18th
not
to the
available
25th.
the 18th either.
What about 19, 20, 21?
I'm gone, but I can call in
Right,
depending
19th
on the
holiday,
time.
but-
Oh, you know what? The 19th is Juneteenth. I think we should all take it off.
We are.
Yeah.
Can we do the 17th, like in the afternoon, like around 2 o'clock? One or
I can
two, around
reschedule-
2?
I can reschedule.
Yeah, I
an
think so.
appointment,
That works for me.
yeah.
All
I
right,
could do it by 2.
At what time
We'll meet here at 2,
works?
2 o'clock. Boss. President decides.
Yeah, Tom.
that sounds good.
Does that work for you too? Okay. Catherine, are you good that day too? Monday at 2 PM.
17th at 2 PM, sure. And I will make phone calls to law firms and ask questions, and I will report back what I get told. Not having paid for it, it's not attorney's advice. But I am a firm believer in getting more information on which this board has to make a 20-year decision. But not
Okay, so if we're gonna schedule a meeting on Monday at 2, did I just put in here, I'll make a motion to adjourn this meeting at 7:09.
That's the closed session. When did we want to follow up with the open session
For approval of the.
or final review?
Final review.
Can we, do Tuesday? I just want to make sure
I'm
that
flying.
this is done
Tuesday is-
before flying. I mean.
The 17th is what, Monday?
Yes.
Sundays.
So George, what time do you have, I mean,
That
can't
only
we,
gives me 24 hours a day, or 24 hours to work with Keith.
how long do
Yeah.
you need, Jim? Because I'll have a break on, I'm going to this.
How about the following Monday
No, I mean, after the 20, like the
Do
20.
that.
or
I'll
the,
have to call
or the
in.
26th?
The 24th maybe, or?
Yeah, I'll have to call
I'm
in.
available anytime
First time legal's available is the 26th.
except
Okay.
nights.
I'm, gone the 26th on.
Well, do we need legal, do we need legal for, if we're just gonna
We-
approve it
No,
in
we
open
have to have
session?
legal.
No, no, for the second meeting, because we're just approving it in open session, right?
20th or 21st,
24th is better,
24th.
because I'll be done with this,
24th
and I
is-
still will be on the east
I know.
end, I'll have a better address than.
You available on 24th?
I'm in Puerto Rico.
No, that's.
Zoom in? No. Oh,
But I mean, what are we
my
doing
time.
on the 24th? We would just be approving it in open session, because hopefully we'll be done with the negotiations on Monday, the 17th, right?
I'll get my final direction from the board.
On the 17th.
And, hopefully. Are you available 2021?
I'm in Puerto Rico from the 18th to the 25th.
A long flight, you don't want to bounce back and forth.
Right, so, we have our direction,
Well, no, when's the second meeting?
17th, we got,
the 17th.
But then we have another meeting after that to
Oh,
approve it.
so we've got one on the
Wait,
can't we
7th.
do it on the 17th also? Both of them?
No, he
No.
just said no.
Oh,
So
he does not, that's right.
He has to
He's signed.
negotiate.
Right.
Okay, what time on the 24th?
I'm open all
All
day,
day.
All day.
but I,
What time on the 24th?
Melanie, I'm gonna have to give you
We
an
have
address.
a 9 to 10 tour.
What's the tour?
That got pushed because Virginia's not available.
Oh, it
Yeah.
got canceled?
Yeah,
Oh,
that'll probably happen in July. Jim, I'll have to
Better for
give
you or afternoon.
Melanie-
It'll probably be good.
Melanie, I'll have to give you an address where I'll be
So we
in
want to.
Baltimore on the, for the 24th meeting, so I can zoom in.
Some place where the public
I'll
can
have-
actually go.
Things go.
So 10 a.m. on the 24th?
24th, 10.
But
10 a.m. on the 24th,
actually
okay.
go to,
Okay.
right?
It's gonna be my home in Baltimore.
Virginia.
Oh, if you're gonna participate remotely?
Yeah.
I have an address.
Yeah, we will have to do it under the traditional Brown Act
I
rules.
understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have an address to be published and it's my home there, so. Baltimore. 10 a.m. Pacific time, right, on the
I'll fly to
24th?
Baltimore and join you.
yes.
So 2 p.m. on the 17th
2 p.m. on Monday and
and 10.
10 a.m. on the
10 a.m. to
24th.
24th.
Okay,
And oh,
Now your motion?
I'll move to adjourn.
I'll
We
second.
didn't do item number
There's
2.
one item yet.
Oh, item number 2.
Yeah, we
You
just.
got 1 minute, John.
5 minutes still,
Yeah.
18 minutes. I have it folded here too.
All right, this is an update as requested by the board on
In
the
Anaheim.
Twin Harbor RV
Now that-
Park restroom and Greens Place
On the
project.
24th.
As many are aware, we've, been at this project for quite some time. The project, has been subject of several public meetings beginning in early 18 and was discussed for years, even prior to that. So many people seem to believe that that's when the restroom construction actually began. In reality, construction bids were not even opened until late 2022. And the first pre-construction conference was not held on site until the end of 2023. No, I'm sorry, until January, end of January of 2023. So January, I think 16 of 2023 is when we had the first pre-bid or pre-construction meeting on site with the contractor. The contractor was then able to start ordering initial construction materials, which were also delayed due to COVID, just challenges with COVID starting to end in late 2022, early 2023. And then also, of course, we had the challenges with the toward the end of 2022 and into early 2023, all the rain issues. In my staff report, I do lay out some of the other challenges that we've had and continue to have. I would like to just say though that the grant, we were very fortunate to have won 3 funding grants for this project, totaling over $500,000. All of those grants came with requirements, performance requirements, and as we moved along with the project, required that the grantor representatives come to the site, to which they all seem to want to come to our site. So that had to be scheduled, and
What is
that did slow and even stop construction progress from time to time. Then late 2023, of course, and early 2024, we again suffered significant rain delays. All that said, we have been at this project for a year and a half, not quite a year and a half, which is just not extremely long for a project like this. All that said, again, we now expect this work to be finished by the end of this week or early mid next week. And then we're hoping that the Half Moon Bay City's inspector, sometime in the middle of next week or the end of next week, will approve the project completely. The restroom building construction, the green space issues, and the ADA parking improvements. So that board and the public are aware, we still are having some challenges with the contractor regarding the landscaping. We're going to continue to work through those challenges, but we have an additional built in. We have an additional 180 days that they are held for maintenance issues, which we can continue to hold their feet to the fire.
Raise our cost.
Pardon? No.
Okay.
And the cost, another good issue or big issue here, this contractor has worked in good faith with us. There's been, again, some reports of them not, sometimes not being at the site working. We've done very well, I think. Our design engineering team and project manager has continued, as I continue to keep on our contractors. But obviously, if we are requiring them to stop progress, their team cannot do anything more until our grantor team gets to inspect during the performance inspections, and are also permitting. Half Moon Bay we've been working very closely with them, but they did again just on May 16th. I was there. May 16th, I was there with them, hoping that would be our final inspection. And we were told that we needed to improve a drainage ditch that's not even on our property, but it is adjacent to our property, and our permitted plans did allow for us to drain our freshwater showers, just rinse off showers, not like people are going to be using soap, etc. But those showers do drain in. Those outdoor rinse off showers were planned to drain into an existing stormwater drainage ditch, which acts as a bioswale. They determined that they wanted us to completely reline it and put in what they call a green gabion basket, backfilled with imported biotreatment soil. All of this had to have our team redo a design that they then had to approve, and we really got all that done in record time. So I think that just from my observations, I think our team and working in good faith with the contractor. The project's finally coming to an end, and it's been a significantly challenging project from the very beginning with all the community input. And I think everybody wants the project done yesterday.
Right.
As do we all, but it hasn't
And other
been,
projects.
hasn't been in construction since 2018, as many people regretfully have been under the misunderstanding. And I'm welcome to answer any
What's
questions.
interesting about Half Moon Bay, making us do something that's not on our property. We can back.
Well, they're also
They have a
concerned,
structural deficit.
they're also concerned with our,
Structural deficit.
with the sand that potentially, whether these are realistic concerns or not, it's not up to us to be able to successfully argue. But they did say that they were concerned that sand coming from our outdoor shower users could potentially further cause their pipes to fill. Yeah, their storm drains to fill.
Maybe
It
there's
is,
a
it is
bad
true,
engineering.
which we pointed out, that this ditch has historically eroded and been in very poor condition. If you look at it now, it is perfect. It's pristine. And so, and we are using that ditch. It's just not something that we could argue strongly
So did
against.
they argue that this is like especially toxic, radioactive sand that's being imported and being dropped in our harbor?
Letter for-
Or is it just local sand that people bring on their bodies and their feet from being at
They
the
only
beach?
pay-
It's local
Yeah.
sand, of course, but it's just, it is
Still a month behind.
arguably.
I'll correct that.
Their argument is that
Is the general language good?
the sand that is normally on the beach is now being transported on bodies to the shower.
Stop.
Going through the drain to that ditch, if not protected as we did with our green gabion basket and the mat that we were required to lay down, et cetera. If it weren't for that, the pipes could clog.
I will add that I have requested the city of Half Moon Bay direct TOT funds of $100,000 a year that they get off that trailer park. And I said it should be preserved for maintenance up in our area. And they scoffed at those ideas.
And I'll just add that you've made exactly my point on why we need detailed language in a contract. Because we are subject to that kind of detailed requirements that maybe we want to make clear that they're not our problem to others. I move that we. Wait, we already.
This
adjourned.
This is information, so, okay, adjourn.
Well, I
Make a
move,
motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
All right. Roll call.
President Mathush.
Aye.
Commissioner Zemke.
Aye.
All right.
Out.
And Crowley.
Aye.
Commissioner Slater Carter.
Aye.
And
Yay.
Melanie, do you want my address in Baltimore?
Yeah. Hold on.
Well, I made dinner before. She'll get home at 7:30, at 7:45 and she'll have her
No, my
dinner.
wife drove me down here saying, oh.
Oh, where is she at? You have dinner down